Senator from Tennessee.
Mr. President, the senator from New Hampshire is always as eloquent as she's fighting for students in New Hampshire, and I want to assure her if any of those 5,000 students already have a Perkins loan, they're not affected by this. In fact, almost no students across the country who have a student loan or are about to have one are affected by this. This affects there are $8 billion worth of outstanding student loans. There are of outstanding Perkins loans out of $1.3 trillion in student loans. So we're talking about less than 1% of all the student loans. We're talking about student loans that might affect students who go a year from now to college. No one who currently has a Perkins loan is affected by this. And what is our goal here? Our goal is to help students afford college. How do you help students afford college? By number one, continuing a program that has a higher interest rate than the loan they could get in a regular student loan. The Perkins loan rate is higher than every single student who applies for a loan is entitled to. Number two, how do you help students by continuing the Perkins loan, which does not have the income-based repayment program that every single student who applies for a student loan is entitled to if they'll go and apply for one. Now, what is that income-based repayment plan? It says that you can pay your loan back over up to 20 years, not paying more than 10 to 15% of your disposable income each year. So if you're a teacher or a firefighter or if you have a lower income position, you're not treated the same as a broker or somebody else. You pay back less because you earn less. And if you get to the end of the 20 years and you haven't paid it back, your loan is forgiven. That's the law today. That's a loan that's available to every single student going to college. So the low-income student can take advantage of that. What we're seeking to do in our discussions, and they are indeed bipartisan, the proposals to change this are bipartisan, is to say instead of a combination of student loans, which is you have a whole stack of confusing student loans and you pay one to this part of the federal government, another to this part, another to this part, you'll have one student loan. At the lowest possible rate, you'll pay it to one person and you'll have the advantage of the 20-year repayment, and if you haven't paid it off, it's forgiven. And we'll simplify your application for that loan from a 108-question form, which I can't hold up according to the Senate rules, to 2 questions, and we'll simplify the process for paying it back. So that's what we're proposing to replace the Perkins loan with. Now, we haven't made a decision about that. We've had 8 hearings. I'm working with Senator Murray, the senior Democrat on the Education Committee, and other members of the committee, to make sure that we come to a conclusion, and I'm not sure what conclusion we'll come to. But the argument I'm making is the same argument that so many witnesses before our committee said: simplify the student aid process. You're discouraging low-income kids whose parents may never have been to college because they're invited to say, okay, you can go to college and we'll help you, but fill out this 108-question form. Fill it out in your senior year about your taxes before you file your tax return. Sorry, you can't go to use your Pell Grant year-round. And here's such a complex repayment form. It's generous, but so complex you'll never use it. So we're losing millions of students, most of them lower income, most of them the first of their families to go to college because of the complexity of our student aid system. So we have bipartisan proposals to simplify it, and this is part of that. This said instead of getting 3 federal loans, you'll get 1. And you'll get more, but you'll get 1 at the lowest rate with the most generous income repayment. Now, why wouldn't that be a better deal for the students we're trying to help? Why would we extend something with a higher rate and no generous repayment program? That's the argument here. So I see no need to rush through the House and rush through the Senate a subject that we're considering in our committee, and considering it well and in a bipartisan way, and we plan to mark up and have ready for the full Senate our proposal by the end of the year. I see no need to rush this through so fast. Every student with a Perkins loan today still has one tomorrow. And those who might apply for one next year will have time to do that if for some reason the program's reinstated. And while they're at it, they can apply for a federal loan that now exists with a lower interest rate and a better repayment plan. So that's the reason. My reason for standing here is because we're trying to help students afford college by simplifying the process of application, the time they're there, and the process of paying their loan back. And you don't do that with a higher rate and no repayment program and a confusing bunch of loans. Now, you could come back and say, but this is an additional loan, and that would be true. We haven't decided yet exactly what the total amount that the federal government would allow a full-time student to borrow is in our new reauthorization. But this could be a third loan on top of other loans. Well, how many senators have stood up on this floor and complained about the overborrowing of students, about how we have $1 trillion plus of loan outstanding, about how students can't pay back their loans? And so what we're trying to do is to say to students, we don't want to encourage you to overborrow. We don't want you borrowing more than you can afford. What we want to offer you is a plain, clear, simple opportunity to borrow an amount of money at a low interest rate with a generous repayment plan. And we want to give the university you're borrowing from more latitude in explaining to you whether you can pay that back or not. Now they're handcuffed. And who does the handcuffs? We do the handcuffs. We have federal laws that make it hard for universities to counsel students about how much to borrow. So I don't think we're doing students any favor by extending this loan. We're not cutting anybody out of a loan who already has one. In fact, we're offering all students a low interest rate loan. Now, the last point I'd make is it is a revolving fund. It is true that the federal government probably has contributed about 2/3 of the revolving fund, and that universities themselves contribute the rest. It is true also that, and I've heard from university presidents, they find this loan useful and as they put together their financial aid package. I've heard all of that. But for the last number of years, the federal government hasn't been contributing to the Perkins Fund. For the last number of years, the Congress has said it's time to sunset the Perkins loan. Both President Bush and President Obama at one time or another have recommended that we sunset the Perkins loan. And many of the witnesses before our committee said the same thing. They said, you're overwhelming these students and their families. Give them something simple. Give them something direct. Give them one grant, give them one loan. So that's our proposal. One grant, one loan, and the loan will be at the lowest possible rate, lower than the Perkins loan, the most generous repayment terms that are responsible. The Perkins loan doesn't have those repayment plans, and make it available to every single student at an amount that we would agree upon, and then allow the universities and the colleges and the technical schools to be able to counsel these students. Don't borrow too much, because a loan is not a grant. A grant you can keep. A loan you're going to have to pay back. And there's even been some talk, and I support the concept, of saying to the universities and schools, you're going to have some skin in the game. If you're one of those schools or universities with too great a default on your student loans, then you're going to get to pay some of that because we want you to take some responsibility for it. I actually am not one of those Americans who's so concerned about the amount of student loans that we have out today. I think it's a pretty healthy indicator in many ways. And we have $1.2 or $3 trillion in outstanding student loans. We have about $900 billion in outstanding car loans. The average student loan for a 4-year graduate is about $29,000. Average car loan is about $28,000 or $29,000. Now your car will depreciate. Your degree will appreciate. It'll earn you, some say, $1 million more in your lifetime than you'd otherwise have. The unemployment rate in America today for Americans with a 4-year degree is 3%. Average income for those Americans is in the mid-40s. So I think it's a pretty good investment if we can say to Americans, go on to the community colleges, where the average tuition is $3,300 and the average Pell Grant is about $3,300 if you're low income. So it's, for all intents and purposes, free today. for most low-income students. So go on and get that degree. Improve your skills. That's the way you make it up the ladder in this country. And then we'll loan you some money at a low rate with a generous repayment term on top of that if you need that. But we're going to take steps to make sure we don't loan you more than you can pay back. I think that's a pretty good picture of the American dream. An unemployment rate of 3%, average income that is twice what the average total student loan debt of an individual is, a chance for 2 years of community college or any 2-year school if you're low income, with the taxpayer paying the average tuition of $3,300. That's a pretty good system, and we're trying to make it better. But it doesn't, the right way to do this is to take all this discussion that we've had, and I say again, in a bipartisan way. All these things I've talked about have been proposed by Democratic senators and Republican senators. Finish our work in the committee. That's the way our Senate is supposed to work. And then recommend to the full Senate what the student loan program ought to be. And if some senators want to say, we want to take $5 billion and for the next 10 years authorize extending the Perkins loan program, that's what it costs, according to the Congressional Budget Office. I'm probably going to stand up and say, let's take that $5 billion and instead let's give a year-round Pell Grant to students. Let's pay for the Pell Grants for all those students who are persuaded to go to college because we've simplified their application form and their repayment form. We're going to have a lot more Pell Grants, a lot more students getting degrees. And if we do, we'll have a lot more Americans joining the middle class. So we're all for students. We're all for helping. We want you to succeed. But my argument is that so far I'm not persuaded that you succeed more with a Perkins loan that has a higher rate and no repayment program than you do with a student loan that I've described that's already available to you. It's already available to you with a lower rate and a generous repayment program. So this is a healthy debate. It's one we're having in our committee. I'm actually glad it's gotten the attention of enough senators. We're hearing from college presidents all over the country. Soon we'll have this debate in our full committee, then on the Senate floor. I look forward to it, and I think the students of America will benefit from the work that we're doing in a bipartisan way. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.